Welcome to the Feed Your Family Tonight podcast. Do you dread hearing the question, what's for dinner? Whether you spend your days keeping up with toddlers, running kids to after-school activities, or juggling a career and family, getting dinner on the table can be a struggle for us all. I'm Mariefiebach, a business owner, wife, and mom of 4. I'm on a mission to build stronger families one dinner at a time, and I'm here with tips, tricks, and inspiration you need to feed your family tonight. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Feed Your Family Tonight podcast, episode 152. I'm your host, Mariefiebach, and today we are going to talk a little bit about pantry staples. I'm kind of going to go into the categories that I have for pantry staples and why getting pantry staples is so important to you and how it is going to make picking recipes and getting dinner on the table easier for you. In my Feed Your Family Tonight holiday planning guide, I have a sheet that says grocery list on it. And really, it is a grocery list builder for when you are doing a deep dive grocery shopping trip. I talk about that deep dive grocery shopping trip in episode 99 and how getting your house stocked every few months with the basics makes your life so much easier, because when you're going to the grocery store, you know that you have your home stocked with the basics and all you're having to really do is fill in with fresh ingredients. You also don't have to worry about buying things like toilet paper and soap and shampoo and deodorant and all of those things, because you have those in your home and you are restocking them on a regular basis with a deep dive grocery shopping trip. When I do a deep dive shopping trip, I usually do it about once a quarter. I am stocking up on my pantry basics. But do you even know what your pantry basics are in your home? Last year, when I was doing all of my grocery shopping by a grocery delivery service, it quickly became clear to me what my pantry staples were, even if I wasn't consciously choosing pantry staples, because the program that I ordered my groceries from would suggest things that I usually buy because they got to know my habits and they knew the things that I was buying. And some of those things on my list, I was totally not surprised. But there were a few things that surprised me. One of them was ice cream cones, and that was kind of a pandemic treat that I started getting that it wasn't part of my normal habits. But when the pandemic hit, I definitely started getting ice cream cones pretty regularly because it was something fun and nostalgic, and it brought a little bit of joy when times were really, really tough. But another thing that showed up on my grocery ordering service was ground turkey. I didn't realize how much ground turkey we actually ate. We eat ground turkey quite a bit, but I wasn't fully conscious of how much we actually were eating of the ground turkey until it started showing me how much I was buying on a regular basis. And so if you are using an online grocery pickup or grocery delivery service, you probably have a pretty good idea of what your regular staples are just because it's showing you what you're buying week to week. But if you are going into the grocery store, there are things that you are probably naturally putting into your cart that aren't necessarily on your grocery list, but they are just things that you buy every week because you know that you use them every week. And the idea with this podcast is for you to start thinking about what those things are and then try to think about stocking up on those pantry staples so that it's one less thing for you to do at the grocery store. And then I'm also going to talk about how to use those pantry staples to choose recipes and to expand your family's palate. So before we get into that, I want to go through kind of my categories of what I look for when I am trying to get my list of pantry staples together. The first category is fruits and vegetables. In my house, that is usually fresh fruit and frozen fruit. I also usually always have apples and lemons, usually limes, and usually one other kind of fruit. And then for vegetables, we cannot live without salad supplies around my house. We literally go through 12 to 15 heads of romaine lettuce a week. I always have a big giant box of spring mix. We go through 5 to 10 pounds of carrots a week and usually a couple of bunches of celery. I always have carrots, celery, lettuce on my grocery list. Those are just part of the things that are staples. Then I usually kind of fill in with kind of other veggies. I'm thinking about onions and potatoes and sweet potatoes. And as we go into fall, I'm usually having some kinds of squash that stick around. So some of these other vegetables change with the season. In the spring, I'm liking to have things like snap peas and asparagus. And in the fall, I'm thinking sweet potatoes and squash. And those kind of change. And there are other vegetables that float in and out. But my staples are salad supplies and apples and lemons. You're not going to find my refrigerator without those, or you know that it's grocery day if my refrigerator doesn't have those things in it. Second category is milk, eggs, cheese, the things that you're going to find in the dairy case. In my house, we usually have whole milk and almond milk. Both of those are always in my refrigerator. I usually have some type of a shredded cheddar cheese. Sometimes I'll have some shredded mozzarella. I usually have some type of a sliced cheese, and we always have eggs. I think my refrigerator would feel naked if there wasn't at least 1 or 2 cartons of eggs. And those are the staples that I have in my house. Sometimes sour cream's in there. Sometimes I've got cottage cheese. There's other things, yogurt, that float in and out, but you're always going to find whole milk, almond milk, some type of shredded cheddar, and some type of sliced cheese. You move on to the frozen foods. What are the frozen foods that are in your house? And this is where I also got a little bit surprised because I was buying lots of food for a teenage son who is very particular in his taste, and we have let him buy a lot of what I would call junk food because that is what I need to do to preserve my relationship with him. And so there are frozen pizzas and frozen chicken nuggets and frozen burger patties, some interesting frozen foods that my son has. But then we always have frozen veggies, frozen fruit. We always have beef from our farmer. And I like to always have some type of a frozen chicken in my freezer. Sometimes it's raw, sometimes it's cooked, but I like to have chicken available. What are the frozen foods that you always have on hand? You think about your meats. What do you keep frozen? What do you always keep in your refrigerator? Do you always have deli meat? Do you always have ground beef in your freezer? Do you always have ground turkey? What are the meats that you are using over and over again? In our house, we eat a lot of boneless, skinless chicken breasts. So I usually try and keep several of those frozen for a quick and easy meal. I'll make my Instant Pot chicken and brown rice that takes 20 minutes in the Instant Pot, and the chicken always starts frozen. So that's a quick and easy meal for days when I just don't have a lot of brain space to make anything that takes creativity. What are the meats that you keep on hand? And maybe you're not keeping meats on hand, but starting to keep a few of the basic meats that you eat over and over again, just 1 or 2 portions for your family in the freezer for days when it's going to be another day before you get to the grocery store, and having that in the freezer is going to save you from making an extra trip. Next category is breads and cereals and grains. Do you know that bread freezes really, really well? And I usually have a loaf of whole grain bread in my freezer at all times. My kids will pull it out for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for lunch. And a lot of times I'll make that on the frozen bread. It's really easy to spread peanut butter on frozen bread. That's a little mom tip for you. And then you put the frozen sandwich in the lunchbox at night and it's thawed by the next day, or you could even make it in the morning and it's thawed by lunchtime. It's easier to spread. Your bread doesn't go bad as fast. And so that's something. Grains. What kind of grains are you keeping around? And when I think grains, I think brown rice. I think quinoa, which technically isn't a grain, it's a seed, but in my mind, I treat it like a grain. Do you keep dried beans? Do you keep canned beans around? What are kind of these things that you use to round out your meals? Do you keep oatmeal around? Are you someone who has cream of wheat or oat bran? My house would be empty if I didn't have oatmeal and quick cooking oats. I always have oats. I always have brown rice. I usually have quinoa. But what are kind of the basic grains, cereals, beans? And while we're talking on beans, let's kind of move into canned goods. What are your basic canned goods that you always have on hand. I always have crushed tomatoes and some tomato paste, usually have tuna and canned salmon in my house. What are these main canned goods that you use? What are the spices, oils, condiments? My house is always going to have ketchup. It's always going to have a yellow mustard. I'm always going to have olive oil. I usually have avocado oil in my bin. I always have 2 or 3 different kinds of vinegars. And then my spice cabinet, well, that's a whole nother thing. But I'm always going to have cumin, garlic powder, onion powder, hot pepper flakes, oregano. Those are kind of the base flavors that I'm using all the time. Okay, so I've kind of gone through my main staples that I keep around. And you think, okay, that's all good and nice, but why does it matter? Why do I need to keep those staples? These are the things that you go to over and over again. If you buy them in a deep dive grocery shopping trip, it's going to free your brain from having to get those things at the grocery store. But it also is going to help you dictate the kinds of recipes that you choose when you are trying new recipes. I talked in episode 146 about how to pick a recipe that your family will eat. And in that podcast, I take a deep dive, but the main idea is that you don't want to change 2 things at once when you're trying to expand your family's palate or try a new recipe. You want to stick with kind of the same ingredients, or you want to stick with the same flavors. So if you have your kitchen stocked with a bunch of these base ingredients, then when you are trying to find new recipes, you see that the recipe is using ingredients that you already have in your house. That's usually a good sign that you're onto a recipe that your family is going to eat. Or maybe the recipe uses one ingredient that you don't usually have in your house, but all the flavors are the same things that you know your family likes. That might be a good recipe to pick as well. When you start having a well-stocked pantry and you start knowing the kinds of foods that your family likes to eat, it is much easier to expand their palates from that base than to be trying new things over and over again. My dear friend, Betsy Wallace, she has a podcast with her sister called The Dinner Sisters, and they are trying new recipes, 3 of them every week. And a lot of these recipes will have specialty ingredients. And for me, that would feel so exhausting, having to try new cooking techniques, new flavors, new ideas over and over again every week. And I think that would be hard on my family as well. My family likes to get into a rhythm, and I bet your family likes to get into a rhythm as well. And when you're in that rhythm, it's easier to change small little things from your base pantry ingredients than it is to be trying new things over and over and over again. It helps with your decision fatigue. It helps you to be more efficient at the grocery store. It helps you to be more efficient in the kitchen. And it also takes away a lot of the brain work and a lot of the decisions when you are trying to find new recipes. When you start having a kitchen that is working with you rather than against you, and you're having half-used bottles of all of these different new spices and new condiments, and it feels frustrating and it feels cluttered. But when you kind of declutter your main ingredients down to the ones that you know your family likes, then it is easier to play within those main ingredients. It's kind of like with kids. They say that kids have more freedom in a fenced backyard. Your pantry staples become your fenced backyard. And you can bring a new toy in. You can bring in a new spice, or you can bring in a new condiment, or you can bring in a new ingredient, but you're still kind of playing in your fenced backyard, and it's going to make the decisions for making dinners easier. I would love to hear in the Feed Your Family Tonight Facebook group about what your pantry staples, what your base ingredients are, and how those ingredients help you play in your fenced backyard. Next week, we have something really fun. I have an on-air coaching call with a delightful lady. You will not want to miss it. So tune in next week for my on-air coaching call with Carmen. For now, friends, join me in the Feed Your Family Tonight Facebook group. Let me know what the base ingredients and your pantry staples that you keep that help you make your decisions because you are choosing recipes for your family. For now, friends, take care.